Hi everyone, it's 9:31 and welcome to EdgeTalks on the 3rd of November. This session we're going to be looking at FabTeams Week, connecting people for innovation and collaboration. So thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to introduce a subject that has everyone has an opinion about, and it affects all our working lives, how to create fab teams at the edge. And we think it's about connecting people for innovation and collaboration. So we want to hear your views on what works, any methods and approaches that you've used, and what's the evidence behind some of this. But before I go on, there's a couple of announcements I'd like to make. If you'd like to join our EdgeTalk community and receive regular updates on the sessions, contact me, janet.wildman@nhs.net, or let me know who you are by registering your interest in the chat room. The second announcement I'd like to make is that the next EdgeTalks will be on the 1st of December, when we will be looking at the role of music in supporting patient care. So that's going to be a fantastic way to end the year for EdgeTalks, and we hope you'll be able to join us then. Okay. So, Paul, could you move my slide along? Thank you. Right. So my name is Janet Wildman. I'll be chairing the session today. I'm joined by the EdgeTalk team, Lee Kendall, who's going to be monitoring the Twitter activity and feeding back during the session. We've also got Rosie Redstone, who's also going to be the Twitter monitor for us. And we've got our regular Paul Woodley, who's going to be looking at the chat room, but also providing the technical support for us throughout the session. So if you're joining in today and beyond, please use the chat box to contribute continuously during the web seminar. And also, please tweet. So we want to bring in as many other people who are not necessarily registered to attend the WebEx, but if you're on Twitter, we'd like you to use the hashtag #EdgeTalks and the handle @HorizonsNHS. That's #EdgeTalks and the handle @HorizonsNHS. So I'm just going to hand over to Claire Haig, who's going to introduce herself as well as the other three speakers that we have today, and we'll take it from there. So over to you, Claire.
Brilliant. Thank you, Janet. It's really great to be with everybody this morning for the EdgeTalk, and I am absolutely delighted to see the stories that we're already starting to collate around this topic, which is a great topic and something that's so important for all of us working at the edges and working to collaborate and innovate. So today we've got three amazing presenters with three great stories to share. So let me just tell you about them before I go on to talk a bit about the work that I've done. So let me just get this slide to move. Here we go. So today we're going to hear from three amazing people that are really pushing the boundaries on what we mean by teams. So we're going to hear from Kath Doman from Harrogate Together, who's going to talk through the work that they've been doing. We've then got Fiona Zanilli, who's from North East Essex CCG, is going to talk about the high intensity user work and how they're looking at borderless teams. And then Andrew Massini from Stockport Together and the work they're doing there to look at assess to discharge. So I don't know if you want to say hello, Kath, Benoa and Andrew. Just want to say hello to everybody. Is that?
Hello, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, so we're going to go on to their stories in a minute. What I wanted to do was just give you guys an opportunity to start to hear some of the themes that are already starting to emerge around this. And I don't know who's already managed to have a look at the TriSider crowdsourcing tool that we sent out ahead of the EdgeTalk, and we've been tweeting lots about. We wanted to basically crowdsource people's ideas around how to develop teams at the edges and what developing teams meant. So this is a bit of a summary of some of the themes, really. And Janet, I think here we can do something a bit snazzy, can't we? And we can get people to point at the things that they think are really important for them in terms of these themes that are emerging. So some of the things that we found here are really important.
Yeah, I wondered, Paul, thank you, Claire. Paul, I wondered if you can help us just to encourage our audience just to use the anecdote to point to where they feel they could actually, what's the key areas that really resonates for them.
Right, everybody's got the ability to do annotation now. To find your tools, if you click on the pen symbol on the top left of your screen, you'll get the choices of tools. If you click on the arrow and then click on the screen, you'll be able to indicate, there you go, people are starting to do it.
So connectedness, how people are stronger together. Does anybody else want to come in? Okay. So we've got somebody there talking about being able to challenge and disagree. Oh my goodness, arrows all over the place. Okay. Being able to speak up and share. Quite a few votes for that. Do you know what's really interesting? We've got votes all over the place. So actually that tells me that generally the themes that are emerging are kind of overall a really nice picture and fitting with the crowd's kind of thinking on this, really. And I don't know if we can save this slide, Janet and Paul, so we can keep this just as a small snapshot of what people are saying. And Janet, can you put the TriSider link in the chat room as well, so people can add any suggestions to that throughout the conversation?
Absolutely, we'll add that in, but we'll keep these slides because it tells us quite a lot about what people understand are the most important factors that resonates with them when it comes on to teams. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, when I was so this is just my summary of the TriSider data. So it's just kind of one view, but one of the words that came up time and time again was listening, and I think that's a fundamental thing that underpins a lot of this. If you're not listening to what's being said and those different voices and really listening to what's happening, and actually some of this stuff can't happen without that. So that's really, really stood out for me when I was reading that yesterday, really seeing the different views that people had. So that's great. So we want to keep on this conversation and keep knowing what you think makes a fab team, because we know teams are changing, we know teams are kind of not standing still, and that they're working in a very different space. So Lee, can I just bring you in here just to talk through your 10 things fab teams do sketchnote, which is amazing. And gives us a really good overview of some of the other ideas that the Horizons team have crowdsourced around teams and what makes a difference.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many people here on the talk today. So I created a sketchnote, 10 things fab teams do. Back in August, we did some crowdsourcing on Twitter, so asking people to give some suggestions about what makes a fab team. So we were inundated with responses, which was absolutely fantastic. Then we had an expert panel of some colleagues who got together and looked at some of the common themes that came up through the feedback. And from that, I created the sketchnote. So the idea of the sketchnote is to provide a really accessible way of understanding the concept. And it's not intended to be, of course, you know, a chapter and verse summary of everything that Fab effective teams do, but a conversation starter. So some of the key points that Fab effective teams do, and some suggestions for teams to use, and indeed many teams have printed out and have it up in their workspaces, which is brilliant, and they held themselves up against it to see what they're doing well and where they could improve. So please do continue sharing it, and if you have anything that we think we could add, perhaps we can do a new one. So thanks very much for all your support with that. Over back to Claire.
Thank you, Lee. That's great, and yeah, it's a really powerful way of starting to think about that. And as Lee said, really want people's views to be able to add and iterate and develop this all the time, because we know that new thinking and new ideas and new voices are coming into these conversations all the way through, really. So before I share a little bit of my learning from some of the work I've done with Collaborate Out Loud, the social enterprise I founded last year with Kev White, I wanted to get you all to do a bit of a poll, really. So I think I'm seeing a big shift in how people are working on teams, but I'd be really interested in terms of the people we've got on the webinar today to understand a little bit about your experience of team working right now. So what we're going to do is a poll, and Paul's going to help me with this. But basically, I'll read out the question and the 4 options, and then Paul will enable the poll. So where do you currently do most of your team working? I'm really interested in where you currently do most of your team working. Is this in a traditional team reporting to one line manager? Is it mainly in project teams? Is it in collaborative teams across organisations and systems? Or is it in teams that span formal structures and social networks? So, Paul, can you enable the poll so people can start to answer that?
Okay, thank you, Claire. I've just started the poll now, so you should see in the bottom right of the screen the poll questions and the optional answers. So please put in the answer you think is most appropriate.
Okay.
That's it. We've got 17 people who've completed it so far.
Okay, brilliant. So how long have we got remaining on the poll, Paul? About 30 seconds?
20 seconds left.
20 seconds. Okay, 20 seconds for people just to do that, and then we will share the poll outcomes. Okay. So it's really interesting, this, just in terms of where you spend most of your time. Obviously, people will work in all kinds of spaces at different times in their roles. Okay, Paul, are we ready to share?
Yeah, and there you go. You should now see.
Brilliant. So C, we've got 8 out of 18 people saying that they work in collaborative teams across organisations and systems. That's really interesting. And only actually 2 out of the 18 people who completed that spend most of their time working in what we would traditionally see as a team. Also really interested that there's 5 people talking about how they spend the majority of their time working across formal structures and social networks, which again is, I think, a big move that we're moving towards. So can we save those results, Paul, so we keep those?
Yes, those results will be saved at the end of the session.
So that's really useful, just the snapshot, to see if some of the people on this call, where they are and what they're doing, really. So for me, that sets a really good context in terms of today's chat and today's session. And I just wanted to share with you some of the work that we've done and some of the learning that I've had through some of the Collaborate Out Loud work that I do. I just want to explain really quickly what Collaborate Out Loud is, just so you understand the space that we work in. So we work in the D space. We work in the spaces between formal structures and social networks. And what we've created is a series of communities that come together. And this is our community manifesto to give you an idea of how we work, but a series of communities that come together to really focus and take action and to innovate around complex public service challenges. And through doing that, we've learned an awful lot around teams, and not teams in a traditional sense, but teams in terms of C and D, I guess. And also, I guess, B to an extent, because there's projects going on here. And I just wanted to share some of our learning with you around those teams, and then give you an opportunity to ask questions briefly before we move into hearing the 3 stories from our presenters. So this is some of the learning that we've had. So this slide here is just about what we're seeing in terms of how teams are changing. And please contribute during the chat on this, and I'll ask Jana after these 2 slides to summarise chat and to take any questions. But what we've seen trying to work in the spaces between and at the edges is actually there's a lot more short-term and project-based teams, which again fits with what you just said in the poll. Lot less borders, so borderless teams, again, fits with what you've just said. Complexity of the issues that teams are working on has increased significantly. Far more collaborations, so this is about more collaborative working rather than partnership and formal partnership working. A lot more virtual teams, so geographically spread. Multi-layered, so this is about individuals that are often working across multiple teams and spaces at the same time. Agile, so needing that ability to be able to adapt and move across and be more responsive within those teams and who's in those teams. Democratized, they're able to access people, ideas and skills in ways we couldn't before, so that's really interesting and important and fits with all the new power thinking. They're technologically enabled, and the last few things around socially powered, self-organising and whole. So really, they're not necessarily got formal power, they need to build that social power, and they need to kind of self-organise more, and that allows people, and also needs people to bring their whole self to that. Janet, have we got any comments from people on those?
Can you hear me, Claire?
Yes.
Yeah, people are finding that really, really interesting. I think the poll, what the poll found, showed also, but the fact that teams are changing, it really does resonate with people. We're just waiting for people to connect into the chat room, but generally speaking, this is a very complex area, a very changing area, and we don't think that the leadership models have actually caught up with some of this thinking, as well as organizational development. How do you really support teams that are at the edge and that are changing in such significant ways? And how can we make that all work so that we really achieve the purposes of teams? So Leanne is saying, love self-organising and using new power. That's great. Thank you for that, Leanne. But if you've got any comments to make in the chat rooms, then please do so. Or if you've got any questions for the presenters, then we'll put it to the presenters as we go through. But that's it from the chat room here, Claire.
Brilliant. Thank you, Janet. So what I'll now just go on to share before I pass over to Kath is just some of what we're learning about teams at the edges in terms of what makes them effective. And what was really nice was when I started to look at this against the sketch note that Leah developed, what was in the tri-sided crowdsourcing exercise, actually there's loads of resonance. And what I want to say is this is a collective effort of learning from the Collaborate Out Loud communities. It's not my thinking. I've helped curate this with Kev, but this is a collective crowd-sourced wisdom of what we know works and what the communities that are collaborating out loud have told us works. So I think that's really important in terms of where this has come from. So I'm just going to go through this really briefly, then I'll offer a chance for questions, and then we'll spend the rest of the time really concentrating on the stories of Kath, Fiona and Andrew. Okay, so we found that effective communities in the edges and in these spaces between the formal and the informal, they embrace the energy of difference, and they really use the energy of difference in the crowd. They create surprising, simple and social spaces between the formal and the informal. So rather than trying to kind of work in one person's space or the other person's space, how do they create a shared space that they can start to build trust and relationships in? So they do spend time building trust, shared intent, and bringing their whole selves to that space and building a community. They embrace the principles of transparency, openness and democracy. So again, it fits so nicely with what we've already started to talk about. So a democratic space where all views are welcomed. They're social, sharing generosity and kindness. Again, there's so much that resonates back to what's in Lee's sketch note there. They work on the real and often complex challenges that we face in public services. They borrow learning from anywhere and everywhere. That's that they look out. They don't see that they have all the answers, and they know that they need to look out. They co-create novel solutions and ideas to tackle the complex challenges we face. So they're really action-oriented in their productive spaces. Again, fits back with the research. They're able to rapidly test their ideas, change their ideas, and then learn together from this. They work out loud, which is something that I love, the concept of working out loud and sharing as we go and gets us further and faster. And they're really generous, and they are really careful in making sure that they are saying where their ideas and inspirations come from and making sure that they're attributing those. So that's very much about, actually, this is a shared wisdom, and actually we wouldn't have got those if this hadn't have happened. And they spread the best ideas as well as the learning from what hasn't worked. So that's some of the top things that we found work really nicely in teams. And what you'll hear through the stories that are coming up next is that actually this is what they're doing in practice within the stories and the teams that the three presenters will talk about. Okay, Janet, is there any questions before I pass on to Kath?
No questions from us at this stage. We'll come back to you later on in the session. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, Kath, welcome.
Good morning.
Morning, Kath. Okay, so Kath is the Programme Director at Harrogate Vanguard, and Kath's going to share her story of how she's been pushing the boundaries on what we mean by teams and getting teams to work differently. So over to you, Kath.
Okay, so I'm going to share with you the story that and the journey we've been on over the last couple of years, and I'm going to do it warts and all, so you can hear the good bits and the bad bits. It is actually a journey of that started off really in probably in a little bit of failure to begin with, but we've found ways through that, and we're coming out the other side now, and we're finding ways of developing better ways of team working. And I think just to start with, oh, Paul, am I in control of my own slides or not?
You are, yes.
Okay. I am, excellent. Always good to be in control of your own destiny. So Sam Jones, was the original leader of the National Vanguard programme, I found this quote at one point. I thought this is just so true. So being brave enough to say that we haven't got something right, it's often easy to say but hard to do in practice, and we've really tried to take that on board and practice what we preach. So right at the beginning, you know, we became a vanguard back in March 2015. All very, very exciting. Everyone very giddy about it, and it was all, of course, going to be you know, a really easy path, and we were going to come out at the end of it, and everyone was going to be you know, glowing and shining, and it was going to be fabulous. But of course, it was you know, it's been a long journey, big bumpy roads along the way, and we've learned a huge amount and made a lot of mistakes along the way as well, particularly with teams. So what we started with, oops, oh, my animations are not working. Paul, help me.
What were you expecting it to do there?
Well, I'm seeing, I've got some words against the good, the bad and the ugly there that aren't coming up.
Bear with me.
I can see them on the side, but they're not coming up on the screen unless you're seeing them. Aha.
There they are.
Lovely, thanks. Okay, so our ambition to begin with, in common with many of the Vanguard sites and across the country generally, was around how we can develop integrated teams that kept people out of hospital, working closely with GPs, involving social care and mental health, really trying to develop the idea of sharing skills and blurring the boundaries between different roles. Our ambition at the beginning was to dissolve those boundaries between the different organisations and the different professions, and then, you know, everyone working happily together. So that was going to be dead easy, wasn't it? Of course. And you know, we didn't get it right. We set up an initial pilot team in one part of our patch. That went fairly well, and then we tried to spread it across the rest of the district. But I think constantly we were saying to staff, just do something different. You know, innovate, integrate, and the staff were going, how? What do you mean? What do you mean by that? Well, just do something different. It'll be fine. And we really didn't put enough support and mentoring and leadership into that to help give the staff permission and to help them explore how they could do something differently and deliver services differently. We had all kinds of issues, practical issues around things like Wi-Fi and connectivity for staff. So we were trying to get people working out of the same building, out of the same office. So we'd have social care staff, mental health staff coming into the community nursing teams who were the hosts. And practical things like they simply couldn't log on to the Wi-Fi, and there were all kinds of technical glitches which meant they couldn't access their systems and just made their day jobs just really tricky. We didn't provide enough or give enough attention to organisational development and that support to help people understand what it means to create a different way of working and to work in joined-up teams. We simply didn't give enough leadership and support around that, or enough change management support to underpin that. And there was a massive pressure as well, and I think, you know, not just locally, but this was coming down from the national teams, was to deliver this very quickly. Just get on with it, do it fast, and, you know, no attention to the kind of detail that sits underneath that. I've got another thing that should be coming up here, Paul, and it's not coming up, which was the plain ugly. You there, Paul?
Is that in the next slide?
No, it's not the next slide. It's just a few more words on the last slide, on the current slide rather.
Paul, anything you can do on that front?
Hello. Anyway,
Okay,
I'll tell you about it.
Move on then.
So, no, so that was the good bits. The bad bits, the plain ugly bits, were just some really tricky behaviour going on across the teams, and I think that was a consequence of just not supporting them well enough. We had an example of when the social care staff came in to co-locate with the district nurses. They were not made to feel welcome at all. They were not given space. They were put in what became colloquially known as incontinence corner. So that was really, you know, giving bad messages to staff, and it's the stories, isn't it, that underpin the new culture that you're trying to create. So you've got a bunch of staff within an integrated team being made to feel that they're not welcome, they're being shoved in a corner where the continence supplies are kept. You know, that's not going to get anyone off to a good start. I'll move on to the next slide. Okay, so just a quick overview of our journey. So yeah, March 15, very excited, we were a vanguard, and it took, you know, best part of a year to get our first pilot up and running, which went live in February 16. By March 16, a month later, we had a massive reduction in our transitional funding, and I absolutely accept that there's other areas of the country that haven't had any funding at all and had to do this without any additional funding. But all our plans were predicated on having this additional transitional funding, and it dropped by 78%. So we had to stop, regroup, rethink, come up with a new plan of how on earth we were going to do this with 78% less money. And in July 16, came up with a plan. So, but that plan was still fundamentally flawed. November 16, again, going back to what I was saying about just very, very hasty rollouts and the pressure to move quickly on this, we rolled it out across the district. And then by March 17, so earlier this year, the whole thing came to a catastrophic halt. The senior management board, the transformation board, which all the chief executives said, this is unaffordable, it's not sustainable, we've created something that isn't going to work into the future. We need to stop and rethink and think about how we can do it completely differently. So by March 17, it was feeling a wee bit like this. We stopped, we thought, how are we going to do this? And we took a very different approach. So the transformation board, so this is all the chief execs across the system, basically said, we're behind this, we need to do this, but we need to test it in a very different way. So we give you permission to test something radically different, do something very, very different here to what we've seen before. And they pushed us towards creating what they called a pop-up organisation. So you've heard of kind of pop-up cafes, pop-up shops, that kind of thing. Something that felt very, very different, something that felt, I suppose, unique, and gave the people that were getting involved in this something to coalesce around. that wasn't their existing organisations. It was something neutral, something in the middle. It didn't feel like health, didn't feel like social care, didn't feel like mental health. The focus was still on preventing avoidable emissions, and we actually scaled it right back to just working with 3 practices. That's not as small as it sounds, actually. It's about a third of our population, but it meant we could get really into the details, get it right in detail around 3 practices before we started rolling it out beyond. The focus was around true integration, and they gave us support and permission to do this. So they said, if you're getting blocks, come back to us, we'll move those blocks. For the first time, they put one of the chief execs in as a senior responsible officer. So we have the chief exec of the Mental Health Trust there to basically do the unblocking if we couldn't unblock it at our level. So the magic ingredients, I think, have made it work this time. I'm hoping the animation's going to work this time, because otherwise I'm doomed. No, it's not working. I am doomed. Paul, you're going to have to help me here. The animation's not working.
I'm not quite sure what's happening there, Kath. Do you mind moving on, given that we've got just a limited amount of time?
Well, I can, but this is the key slide, really.
So sorry about that.
Let me
Do you want to just run through them, Kath, and just say what they are about the pictures? Is that possible?
Yeah, I will. I can't actually see the slide at the moment, though. It's too small. Oh, we lost Paul.
Shouldn't have done.
Hang on a tick. Let me just see. Right, I'm just going to have to go onto my own desktop at the moment, so apologies if this messes things up. So the first thing, the magic ingredients, were around permission. So this was a permission from the chief executives. Second key thing was ground-up design. So we involved the staff right from the beginning. We gave them protected time. We spent a whole week locked away in a room. This was the whole team plus support people. To design what this team was going to look like, and it went from everything from what's the team name through to the rotas, through to how they were going to run their business, what their values were, what their behaviours were going to be, right through to on the Monday morning following our time out, how we were going to start running this team. So that protected time was really important. Another key magic ingredient was around co-location and what I call sharing the milk. So I don't believe, I mean, it's interesting on the poll earlier around virtual teams, but actually I think to really get teams working together, they need to be in the same room, in the same building, sharing the milk, sharing the biscuit tin, being able to have those corridor conversations and just getting to know each other. The team had access to daily problem solving and access to leadership on a daily basis. So if there was a problem, it could get solved there and then, same day. They had a system of daily huddles which they put in place. So 12:30 every day, the team comes together, the GP comes in, they work through all of their cases, what's happened over the last 24 hours, they challenge each other, everyone knows what's going on, what the plan is for each of the people on their caseload. And it enables them to really progress what they're doing with people. There's never any waste, never any downtime. Access to each of their systems, so we haven't got the magic bullet of everyone working off the same system. We've got the GPs on one, we've got mental health on one, we've got social care on one, we've got community nursing on one, but they can all sit in the same room with their laptops open, all with access to those systems. So during that huddle, they can all see what's going on from each organisation's point of view. Very parochial things like parking. We're just about to move our team into a social care base, which is right in the middle of Harrogate, no parking. Actually, what we've said is we're just going to pay for some parking for the time being. And then finally, anxiety management tools, which is the team's name for their biscuit drawer. So, shame the animation didn't work, but there we go.
Kath, can I just come in then, just conscious of time? Is there anything else key you wanted to say in the next 30 seconds before we just take the questions? Yeah, just the next 30 seconds. I've moved on to the next slide. So one of the things that's really underpinned this is a quality improvement system, and you can see there, hopefully on the slide, there's 6 components to that.
So just very briefly, I won't go through them all, but very briefly, the key things that I think have made a big difference are access to a leadership team. So this is leaders from across the different organisations that can do the unblocking, give the permission, make things happen for people. The daily huddles that I mentioned, and also visual controls. And we've got you've got a bit of a screenshot there, which you probably won't be able to see very clearly. But this board is in the team room, and it shows it at a glance what's going on in the team, how many referrals, where they've come from, when they're going to be discharged, practical stuff, issues to escalate to the team leads to get sorted out, which team you've got available when, and that kind of thing. And then just very finally, this is some of the team. That's not all of them, so missing from that are the GPs, the pharmacists, the social workers, and so on.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kath. It's great to kind of hear what you've done and actually how honest you've been about the stuff that didn't work and how you got over some of that and how you really kept re-looking at what you were doing until you really honed down to what would make a difference. And one of the things I've really heard you talk about was you eliminated some of those practical little niggly things like the parking and just said, okay, for now we'll just sort that out so that doesn't get in the way, which is a really interesting approach to that. Okay, Janet, do you have any questions from the chat or from the WebEx for Kath before we move on to Fiona?
Yeah, before I go into the chat room, can I just see what's happening on Twitter? Can I bring in Lee and Rosie?
Hi, good morning. Thanks so much, Kath, for a really candid overview there. That was brilliant. On Twitter, people have been enjoying some of the slides that I've clipped. So the feedback from the Tricida crowdsourcing and saying they're going to be using it for their own teams. They're looking at what they're doing well and where they can improve. So that's absolutely perfect about collaboration and sharing of knowledge. So that's really good. So please do the conversation at Horizons NHS and hashtag EdgeTalks.
Over to you, Rosie. Anything on your side? Okay, in the chat room, there's been a couple of suggestions around, one of the things is around leadership being really important to this, Kath, as well as sometimes there's a sort of false sense of urgency and the need to sort of step back and to really think about what's really important. And another thing that sort of really resonates with me is around social energy. That's really, the small things really matter, like being able to have conversations, to connect with people. But somebody also talked about technology being really important here in terms of connecting people together around teamwork. So any response on that would be really helpful.
One thing that I really would like to emphasise actually is the disproportionate amount of leadership that we've had to invest in this. When the team and the new way of working is up and running, you wouldn't expect anything like the level of leadership supporting it, because it will become more self-sustaining. But I think often organisations and systems underestimate just how much leadership and people rolling up their sleeves and supporting and making things happen and unblocking problems that this takes, and just support to the teams that, you know, when things are tough, for them to know that there are people that have got their backs and they're looking after their interests, and you know, if people are going to take a step into the great blue yonder, they need to feel safe, they need to feel secure and brave, and I think kind of feeling of, you know, strong presence of leadership around them is really important.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kath. It's been great to hear that. And people can connect with you on Twitter at Kath Doman. And you'll carry on the conversation via the hashtag EdgeTalks as well, and we'll share the slides with everybody so they can see your lovely animations. So apologies they didn't work, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm really conscious of time, and I really want to make sure we have an opportunity to hear from Fiona and Andrew. So what I'm sort of suggesting now is that we maybe take both of those presentations 5 minutes each, and then have a conversation and interactive discussion about the two together, if everyone's happy with that. So if I can introduce Fiona Zanelli, who works at North East Essex. Fiona, can you say hello?
Good morning, everybody.
Hi. Okay, so if we've just got like 4 or 5 minutes just to tell your story, which is an amazing one you told me yesterday. So if I can hand over to you, please.
Okay, so as we are a bit pressed for time, I suppose then I wouldn't really go through all the slides. Maybe I would just kind of try and summarize you know, how we worked together as a team. And I just want to kind of start by saying that this project has been quite successful, and it's got obviously the fact that we've achieved the numbers and the financially we've made some savings and all that. But actually, what you've asked me to do is to look at it from the point of, you know, how did we come together, how did we work across boundaries, because the project does involve a lot of teams, and we have worked through kind of a MDT meeting, and we, even though the MDT meeting is all clinical and it involves ambulance, mental health, acute trust, community services, one-on-one out of hours, and also sometimes GPs. We also work with the social services, voluntary and fire services, police and borough councils. So it's a lot of people that I get in contact with, a lot of people to bring together to serve our patients. But at the same time, the way I have gone about it is to make sure that actually my the aim, the goal, the vision, whatever you want to call it, it was very clear to everybody. So every time that the new members come to the MDT meeting, we actually make sure that we explain to them what we are trying to do here, and we try and make them really well informed, but also try to make everybody understand that we're here, everybody's here to gain something. So it's not just about making sure that we doing our best for the patients, but also I would like to think that we try and make the kind of the working experience for our team members a more enjoyable one. So by working together, they have really seen the benefits, but it hasn't been that easy. Bringing people from different organizations where there is different cultures, making them kind of understand that this is a very important work, but then nobody is actually, Kath was talking before about protected time, nobody has got protected time for this. So these MT meetings happen 4 to 6 weeks, and everybody really does this on top of their work. So it's been, I can say that it's been very challenging in terms that also sometimes there were issues with the technology, information governance, but also with communicating and just having people committed to this project. Another thing that I have to mention just quickly is actually, regardless of how much you've got understanding and you know your theories about bringing and working with teams, I think you just have to be open-minded and just constantly basically be flexible, assess the situation, assess the what's happening, and kind of then constantly try to analyze and readjust things. And one of the things that when we're talking just briefly about the challenges, I think one thing that I need to just mention is the fact that when it came to engaging, most of the organizations that we work with have been quite willing, and actually we worked well together, but there was one organization that was just very, very hard to engage. What we did is, I asked, what do you want us to do? How can we help? Because we really need you to engage, and this is also good for you. And they know that. They knew that that's good, but they didn't have time. So time is always a problem. So what we've done, we've actually now gone to their premises. So our MT meetings now happen in their premises. So this way, they can't escape really, they're there. So, yeah, and I think now pretty much we've come to a point where we've engaged all the organizations that we wanted to. However, with this last organization, there is a lot more work to be done, which will come to the slide, which is about the future. And I think I have to mention just briefly that actually sometimes keeping myself motivated has been a bit of a challenge, because you do come at points where it's just like obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. But I think you just have to be resilient, tenacious, and just believe that, you know, what you're doing is the right thing. And once you have got the trust of the people, you've got people on board, and you've got also good support from your managers, I have to say that. I think it makes life easier for the leader, the project manager, but also it's easier to kind of involve, engage, collaborate across the boundaries. The next, oops. So just like how establishing meaningful connections results in achieving great success. Well, basically, it was that. It's just like keeping everybody supported, keeping everybody engaged. I communicated, and actually to make sure that everybody was engaged and involved and felt that, you know, I treat them equally, but also for me to understand their roles, what they do. I actually have spent one day with the ambulance crew in their van, whatever it's called, a car. I have spent a day with the community matron. I have spent half a day in the GP surgery, and I have spent time really with most of the members of so that I know what they do on a daily basis, and then I knew what we can do differently to make life easier for them, but also serve better our patients. So just to say that I have asked our team members, because I needed this to do as part of the project, as to what they thought about the project, and I'm not going to go through this, but I think there was some very good comments, very useful, but also yeah, very pleasing to see what they think. Where do we go next? So basically, I do believe that this project has actually proved that it's very important to collaborate, to work across boundaries, and especially as we think about future STPs and how we're going to actually have less and less boundaries. I think this is a first step in the right direction. And so for the future, we're going to continue with our work, but also we're going to continue doing it better, having even better processes in place. Even that we've got processes, we're going to make sure that they work even better, but also trying to engage more organizations and just trying to share our knowledge and lessons learned, but also trying to find other organizations that have done the same thing and see what we can learn and share with them. And I think the last thought, sorry, just to summarize, and actually I think it nicely summarizes me and what I've done until now, but also how I am, and that is that let perseverance be your engine and hope your fuel. And I'm going to finish with this. Thank you, and yeah, I don't know if we take any questions or...
Thank you, Fiona. It's great. And when you told me your story yesterday, what stood out for me as well was the fact that you actually really spent time building that trust and creating those spaces and just understanding what was getting in the way. And that really practical example you gave of where you hold the meetings and what that then led to and how that unblocked things is just a real example of actually just need to constantly think about how we can do small things, but also how does that help us in, by doing that, build the trust between the teams, which then helps us to move on further and faster.
Exactly, and also it was done by like engaging everybody. It wasn't just I made the decision, this is what we're doing, because to me then that felt that maybe the rest of the team would think, well, are we less important here? Why are we kind of going somewhere else? So for me, but they saw the importance in it, so we kind of made a joint decision that yes, that's fine. You know, we're all happy to actually move to another a place as long as we get engagement from this other organization. So yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let Andrew just talk through his slides, Fiona, and then we'll take questions for you both at the end, just so that we can work through the time, if that's okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Fiona. Andrew.
Hi everyone.
Hi,
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you move the slides?
Okay, well I've just gone onto my slide. Is everyone seeing that, my slide though?
Yes, we are.
Right, okay, excellent. Right, I'll be very brief. Okay, so I'm going to share, just like Harrogate, we're also a Vanguard site in Stockport, where we're redesigning our health and care system to provide a lot more care out of hospital, to avoid people going out of hospital, and people who are in hospital to get them back to the community, because we strongly believe that people are better at home and people will need to be in hospital when they need to be in hospital. So one of the projects that we did was within that program is what's called transfer to assess, which you might know as discharge to assess. But again, we didn't like that language really, because we think like discharge is quite passive, passing responsibility over, and ultimately what we're doing is really just transferring to another part of our system and provide that care. As it was before we did the project, there could be up to about 70 people on a day in our hospital, which is Stepping Hill, who were medically didn't need to be in the hospital anymore. Generally, all the people who have more complex needs need ongoing care, either in their own home or in a community bed facility. And the way the system was designed with the different professions was all go into the hospital and assess that individual's needs and then provide a care plan. Meanwhile, that person is deteriorating in hospital and ultimately, goes on to and stays in hospital, which is then having an impact on our system and really impacting on our floor. So what we did in that project, it really turned on its head, and what we do is we kind of pull, instead of what we'll call a push system, we're sort of pulling people out of, so the community reaches in and pulls them out, and we identify people very early who are eligible to go home, and then do a comprehensive assessment of that individual's back in their own environment, because people are more in their natural environment. And the challenge with that project was it really cut across all the different services and organisations. So it cuts across the hospital, it cuts across our community nursing services, social work, primary care, and also the voluntary sector. So it's as a pathway, it cuts across all the different organisations, which is so what we did to overcome that or to work through that. We had, as part of that project, we had what we call the big room, and that's a shared space where that non-traditional team comes together. Where you've got the nurse, and you've got the therapist, you've got the district nurse, you've got the GP, social worker, etc. And we'd come together, and it was a real problem-solving room, and we were learning and reflecting and problem solving, so to make the improvements to that process and implementing that, because I'm a strong believer that the people who are working the process are actually the experts, and to really break down those power traditional, as a top-down management, that's how we do it. It's actually the people who are on the front line are best placed to solve a lot of these problems, and those that they can't solve, we take out of the room and escalate that up, so that because it might be beyond the IT systems and connectivity and those things. But really, it's really about empowering them to problem solve. So I'll quickly go on to my next slide. What we did to do that is, first of all, and it's around testing and piloting. So we did the new process with first of all, they designed the new process, so we've very much mapped it together with that group. And we tested it. So we did the new process with one patient only. And it was about learning. So we followed the PDSA cycle, which is an improvement, very, very simple. So we had a plan, we did it. So we tested that with that one patient. We then studied that. So we reflected and reviewed and said, okay, what went well? What didn't go so well? What is the learning from that? And what action are we going to take to then put that into the next cycle of doing that improvement? And then we repeated that cycle. So over time, there's a real philosophy, and I think that picked up in some of the presenters, is learn. So we fail fast, we'll learn quickly. So and it was about trying to create that culture of improvement. So the room, it's not about a project. It's not a project. There's a beginning and an end. Whilst we are implementing a change, which is transfer to assess, as well as that, we're also trying to create a culture of improvement and learning, and to problem solve. So in doing that, we also engaged our improvement partner, which is Aqua in the Northwest, to give those staff the skills in improvement and tools and techniques to transfer that, so they can employ, sort of adopt that within their learning. And really, we did create quite a social movement in that group, because initially, and we've really gone through that sort of forming, storming, norming, and performing cycle as a team, and a non-traditional team. And those power structures, you know, everybody's view is equal in that room. There is it's not about blame, and you know, and initially there was a lack of trust at times, and that's because of history and tradition and protecting oneself. But it's around, we always took it back to our goals and that patient, and we're not about individual services. It's about learning to, you know, empowering people to make those changes.
Brilliant. Andrew, can I just say, yep, 30 seconds left, is that okay?
Yeah, well, I think I've given you an overview of the project there. In terms of our results, I've put some results there, so we've had some tangible improvements within the hospital, but I think in some ways, whilst that's good, that's, you know, really powerful for the patients, we've also really, you know, some of the softer benefits, we've really brought down those silos. The relationships are a lot, you know, greatly improved, and there is a greater level of trust. We are still on that journey, you know, but I think there are pockets and green shoots of that real collaborative, in that real integrated teamwork.
Fabulous. And you know what? The T word comes up again, trust. I think that is a theme that has gone through all of the presentations today, being absolutely essential. Okay, can we just go to the chat room? Questions, Jana, Lee, Rosie, are you able to let me know what's going on? And if anybody wants to ask any questions of Fiona or Andrew at this stage?
In the chat room, it's gone a little bit quiet. I think people are really intrigued by the presenters, but I'm just going to quickly hand over to Lee and Rosie to hear what's happening on Twitter.
There's some really good conversations going on Twitter. Leanne made a really good point about protected time that Raina was talking about in her talk. You know, how can we help teams have that protected time to invest in better team cohesion and collaboration? So that's a really good point. Thanks, Leanne.
Okay. Rosie, anything from you? No? Okay. Okay, really quickly, I've just got a quick question for Fiona and Andrew before we do a quick poll to finish. If you were to give people one top tip for working differently in teams and for helping people to work differently, what would it be? Andrew, what would your top tip be?
I think it's keep it simple. I think you know, and I think I can see in the chat there that, you know, PDSA, it's fairly straightforward, and just really letting go on that power and empowering people because people are they are experts in their field, and it's about letting go of that traditional power structures and just letting it, you know, don't over plan things. Just let it take its shape.
Brilliant. So emergence, new power, allow people to kind of have the space. Fiona, what would your top tip be?
Well, for me, probably it will be like just trying to build that trust, and you know that building trust, it does involve a lot of things. But I think just making sure that you are honest about it. I'm a bit direct sometimes, too much, but I think it has been appreciated because they know where they stand with me. But at the same time, just being honest and just making people understand that, you know, this is at the end of the day for the benefit of everybody. And I think if they see your honesty and your willingness and I think people do come on board.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. That's excellent. Okay, just to end, we have 1 minute remaining. I'd just like people to have a think about the question that's on the screen now and just vote in the poll that Paul will set up now. What we're asking you is, how energized are you to try some of the approaches and tools you've heard about today? How energized are you to, oh, it's gone off. How energized are you to do that? Are you very motivated, a little bit motivated, not sure yet? I still need some convincing. So I'd really like people to just take part in that poll to end, and then we'll just kind of thank our presenters and let you get on with your day.
Okay, as before, the poll's now running. So you'll see it in the bottom right-hand corner as before.
Okay.
That's it. People have got the knack of it now. We're going through a lot faster.
People are doing it, definitely. So while we're voting, I just want to thank Kath, who had to leave, but also Fiona and Andrew for their stories. And I think they're all examples in very different settings, in different parts of the country, where people are really pushing the boundaries and helping people come together. Janet, do you have any final remarks you want to make?
Yes, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody who's joined the call today. This has been a fascinating conversation. It's brought up lots of different issues around what's going to make an effective FAB team, from leadership, to systems, processes, methods, to also having the personal energy and social commitment to drive forward change. So thank you to everybody, and I do hope you will join us on EdgeTalks on the 1st of December. So thank you.
Brilliant. And we will keep the tri-sider going, won't we, Janet, so people can continue to contribute and we can kind of continue to curate what people are saying around this and collect that.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I'm really pleased that 11 out of the 16 people that have completed, 11 are very motivated and 5 are a little bit motivated to have a go. So I think that's a really good result in terms of kind of people doing things. And yes, share via hashtag EdgeTalks what you're doing and have a brilliant day. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Great
Bye.
weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.